Come on, Gremlins, grab the sweeties. Patty, 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 patty. Just take the sweeties, Gremlins. Just take the sweetie, Gremlins. Patty, 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 patty. Come on, Gremlins, just grab those sweeties and come to the dance floor. Patty, 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 patty. Come on, Gremlins, just take the sweeties, come to the dance floor. Patty, 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 patty. Patty, 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 patty. Come on, Gremlin, just take the sweeties, come to the dance floor, and patty, 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 patty. Patty, 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 patty. Come on, Gremlins, come to the dance floor. Just take the sweeties. Patty, 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 patty. Come on, Gremlins, come get the sweeties and come to the dance floor. Patty, 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 patty. Just patty, 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 patty. Patty, 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 patty. Patty, 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 patty. Come on, Gremlins, take the sweeties, come to the party on the dance floor. Patty, 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 patty. Petty, 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 boo. Petty, 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 petty. Come on, Gremlins, come to the dance floor. Just take the sweeties. Patty, 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 patty. Just dance to Wembley, to the dance floor, to the party.